Okay, question number 2. Based on your game design experience, please describe the security risk related to online single-player computer games. Online single-player computer games are online games that do not require more than one person to play the game. Please be as specific as possible when you're recounting your past game design experiences.
Okay. This is very similar to the previous question, but I would say there are fewer security risks, but there still are security risks. Again, it's hacking, cracking, cheating, and illegal redistribution. Those are the major problems. Hacking is common, but there's actually one other type of hacking that becomes more prevalent or more possible in this situation, and that's server hacking, which is much more serious. Because just like with hacking for like a single-player offline game where you can change the code or inject some kind of malware into it or some negative or some harmful functions or something like that into the code, doing that for a server is much, much worse because that server may have the ability to push information to clients, to the games on other people's devices. So server hacking becomes probably the main thing you have to worry about. Sometimes it's as simple as like high scores. A lot of times like very simple online single player games will just have a high score list, and you can't do too much to affect the server, but a lot of times there have been a lot of instances where hackers can get into the high score list and change it around or add their score, which is an impossible score or something like that. And that's kind of a negative thing for new players because they feel like the server's not secure. So if the server is not secure, why do they want to give them their credit card information if that's the way that they're purchasing the game or additional parts to the game, DLC or something like that? And yeah, there can also be more serious server hacking because like with my game, Kaiser, especially Kaiser Redux, I'm going to allow for downloading parts of the game through the server, like maybe new boards or maps that people make, and then they upload to the server, and then other clients, other people with the game can download those new boards to their devices. But if somebody was able to like find a way to get into the server because of that data stream, they might be able to get some password information for certain people's accounts or emails that are associated with those people's accounts. Privacy concerns become a much more serious issue because it's not just one client anymore. You're talking about everybody who exists on a server, which can be hundreds or even hundreds of thousands of people that can be affected just on a single server alone. So that's a much more serious privacy concern, I would say. And that's a much more common thing, like we saw with Facebook and Google recently. Yeah. They've had a lot of privacy concerns, and a lot of those are just because of simple server hacks, basically.
Oh, I see.
And so that's something that has to become a much more serious concern, especially with any kind of online computer game or service.
Yes.
Cracking is not so important anymore because cracking implies that you're able to get around the rights management in some way, and that's much, much harder to do with an online component because usually the developer will create some kind of rights management where the client has to check with the server and the server has to confirm it every time that the client logs on to the online service. So that becomes very hard. I mean, that depends on the type of protection that the developer implemented in the first place, but it's much harder to crack a game like that. It certainly does happen. There, again, are many, many instances where games are cracked, and then people who have not bought the game legally, they are still able to connect to the server and still play the game normally, like the people who properly paid for the game, but it's a much smaller portion of the people who play the game because it requires a lot more technical know-how, a lot more skill to do that, and a lot more patience because a lot of that can take a lot of time and be just outside of the ability of a lot of people in general. It's a very small minority who can actually do that successfully. Cheating, though, is also a big thing. Like I said, with the high score list, you have like the top 10 people or something like that. Like I said, it can be very discouraging to new players or even people who have been playing for a long time if the top 10 list is completely filled with hackers with impossible scores that they can never hope to achieve. So cheating is definitely a concern. But again, if it's a single player only computer game, like people aren't actually competing against each other, it's less of a concern. It's not as big of a deal since it is usually just top 10 lists or something like that. And those can be rectified pretty quickly. A lot of times if there is a problem with the top 10 list, the developers can go in and wipe the ones that are obviously fake and reset the list pretty easily and fix those security breaches or security holes that they had previously. So that's not as big of a deal. The most common or most prevalent recent example of that was probably in a game called Super Meat Boy, I think it was. And that was a very well-known one where hackers were able to get in and affect the top 10 list, and it affected a lot of people because a lot of people play that game, but the developers were able to pretty quickly, I think within like a weekend, they were able to fix the data breach and reset the list, so it was correct. I never had to deal with any hacking, cracking, or cheating with my game Kaiser, my first game, just regular Kaiser, because it was a free game in the first place, and so I didn't have to care about if anybody was cracking it because
it's a free.
And cheating wasn't really a big deal because it was a single-player offline game. So if people were cheating, it didn't really bother me. It was more their own experience they were cheating for. But I definitely had people who did cheat, and they even let me know that they were cheating. They showed me pictures of like impossible situations that they were able to create, which was kind of fun. I actually enjoyed that. But I would like it a lot less if they were doing that in a multiplayer or online situation. And illegal redistribution is also a problem. This actually still occurs with games. I think it's like Hearthstone and a lot of other like mobile games. This can be a problem because the hackers will, of course, get in. They will crack the software. They'll find a way around the digital protection. And then they will redistribute it with their own, through their own means, their own channels. But the game will still connect to the original server, to the developer server. But it might have some malware in the client software or something like that. And this is a problem because, of course, there's a lot of problems associated with this. But the hackers would be able to have access to the credit card information and passwords of the people who are playing the game on their client. But also, it causes a drain of resources for the developers because the client is still connecting. The illegal client is still able to connect to the developer servers, and this can put a strain on their servers above and beyond what they are expecting or what they think it should be. This is more of a problem with like MMOs, massively multiplayer online games, especially RPGs, things like that. But I think it's also still a very small minority because, again, you have to have a lot of technical know-how and to be able to even do a lot of these things or even find ways to do these things, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I guess that's it. But, yeah, that's MMOs. That's a different question. But just for single-player games, it's not that big of a deal, but it can still be a small drain on the developer's resources overall.
I see. Thank you. Can I move to question number 3?
Yeah, and can I quickly ask, how's my voice? Can you hear me okay and everything?
Yes, I can hear you very clear and really very good information. I really enjoy listening to each information you give me.
I'm trying to do my best.
Thank you. I am not a game designer. I am more, I am IT, but in networking side. So it is enjoyable, really. So question number 3. Based on your game design experience, please describe the security risk related to online multiplayer computer games. Online multiplayer computer games are online games that require more than one person to play the game. Please be as specific as possible when you're recounting your past game design experiences.
Yep. Okay, so this is also a very big topic. This is probably the most, since most games are multiplayer, or a lot of the most popular games, at least, are online multiplayer computer games. This is where we see a lot of the most common or prevalent instances of cybersecurity problems. So I'll go back to MMOs for a second, because that's kind of where I left off. MMOs have a big problem with illegal servers, because not only can there be hacking, cracking, cheating, and illegal redistribution, there can also be illegal servers as well now.
Wow.
That's most commonly like with World of Warcraft. Would probably be the most common or most prevalent example. World of Warcraft has a lot of what are called also private servers, and even though this is against their terms of service, there's still a group of people who decided that they wanted the older version of the game, because the idea with a lot of online games, regardless of whether it's single player or multiplayer, is those online games are constantly updated, and they're never like what they were when they first came out. There are changes and more characters or more abilities and whatever, more maps and things like that added to their adventures. But a lot of people may not want all the additional stuff. Maybe people liked it when it was how it was when it first came out, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago.
Oh, I see.
And so there's been a group of people, especially for WoW, for World of Warcraft, who have hacked the game to figure out how it interacts with the server, and then they've cracked the game to stop it interacting with the legal server. And then I'll get back to cheating, but then they take that client, because they now have a client that doesn't communicate with the legal server, and they take the illegal client, and they create an illegal server to interact with the illegal client. So now that game is completely separated from the developer's ecosystem, basically.
Okay.
And they will redistribute the server and the client for free, and anybody can play it now. And whereas before, people would be paying monthly to play this game, people now can play it for free. And yeah, this is obviously very problematic, because the developers are not getting money anymore.
Yes.
And that's obviously a huge problem, especially for a game that's as expensive as an MMO, which are notoriously extremely expensive to maintain and develop for. So that's a pretty big problem, because, again, also since these are private clients and private servers, or I keep interchanging between illegal clients and illegal servers, but same idea. Since these are private now, you don't know what's going to be on the private servers or on the private clients, or I'll stick to illegal. To the illegal server or illegal client, there could be malware that's associated with that, or is installed into your system with the client or the server, or that just tracks your online network traffic.
Okay.
Yeah, it could, just by playing the game, maybe they don't even install software, but just in the background while you're playing the game, they could track your network traffic. So if you do Alt-Tab out of the game, you go to some other, your browser window, and you pay for something on Amazon with your credit card, now they might have your credit card information, or at least your password into Amazon or something like that, just from having access to your network information. or screen capture or something like that. So that gets into a lot of, again, privacy concerns. But the major problem with illegal servers and illegal clients are that they're very easy for new people to get into. Whereas before I had said that illegal, or not illegal redistribution, but like hacking or cracking something like an online single player game is often very difficult, typically, or it can be kind of tricky, and it's usually for like a smaller minority of players. Private servers or illegal servers are actually quite prevalent, and where maybe just as a rough estimate, maybe let's say like 1% of a single player online game might figure out how to crack the game and hack it and not pay you properly for their service. It would be probably closer to 5 to 10% would be able to do that with an online private server or illegal server, because they've been playing the game. Usually it's the people who have been playing the game for a while, and then they hear about this from their friends or the people they play with, and it's usually a very simple process of just downloading and installing some of these things and connecting to servers in the same way they would with the legal servers. So it can be a much more prevalent problem and a much more costly problem because, again, MMOs cost a lot of money, or just any multiplayer service in general costs a lot of money. So that is probably the most major concern, I would say, with multiplayer computer games or online multiplayer computer games. There's also, of course, the problem with like cheating. Because these illegal servers, a lot of times they will change certain variables in order to adjust the game to the way they want it to be played. That's less of an issue because, again, I said like 5 to 10% of the player base may be able to do this. They understand the original game, and so they would understand the differences between the original game and the private server changes. Maybe they're able to level up faster or get more items or something like that, and that may turn them off actually from private servers, and they may actually go back to the legal servers. But yeah, just in general, I'd say private servers are probably the biggest deal with online multiplayer computer games. I'm trying to think what else. I think that's it for now.
Okay.
I think that's it for now. I might, with some of the later questions that talk about mitigating cybersecurity risk, I might bring up some points I forgot about. Yeah. But there's just a lot of topics around it.
Yeah. Security is a huge topic. It's very huge. Yeah. Okay. Can I move then to question number 4?
Yep.
Thank you. Based on your game design experience, please describe the security incidents related to the games you have experienced and how did you handle them. Please be as specific as possible when you're recounting your past experience.
I haven't done a whole lot of online experience. I have had people play my games in an online setting, but that's usually as beta testers or alpha testers. But they have notified me of some problems, but I'll get there. So I'll start with like my offline game Kaiser first, where, like I said, I noticed that some people were hacking it because you can't really crack that one, but they were hacking it or cheating or something like that. And they would bring that to my attention. They would let me know of maybe some security hole that I left open, something that I didn't, that I totally forgot about. And they also showed me that it was a little too easy to reverse engineer my game. And so the first thing that I learned about for mitigating cybersecurity, or for mitigating cybersecurity risks, is obfuscation. Obfuscation, I think I spelled it right. I'm very bad at spelling that one. Yes, but obfuscation, yeah, you probably know about this, which is where you take your computer code and you change it from like readable, from a readable format into something that's really very difficult to read for a human, basically. So if they are able to, well, let's very generally say if if they're able to open your game and look at the code, instead of saying something very, very simple like lives that a player has, maybe they have 3 lives in a game. Instead, it says something like, or like that instead, some very junk, like JO20RF2.
Yes.
So it doesn't really look like what it's related to anymore. That kind of thing. Some obfuscation can actually get extremely complicated and actually add code that doesn't exist in your original code, which makes it even harder for them to reverse engineer and understand what's going on or how you created a certain system. So I learned about that pretty quickly because a lot of my play testers and the people who ended up playing it, or not only play testers, but the people who played it when it was released, they showed me how they were able to reverse engineer my code so that they could hack it and cheat, basically. And so I was able to learn about obfuscation and implement that in my very simply. It was a very, very simple obfuscation, but it at least disallowed people from reverse engineering and illegally redistributing on other sites. And I do try to keep track of, has anybody used Kaiser for their own purposes, like in China or Russia or something like that on their online game forums and things like that. They haven't. So that's good. So I think, it's not a fix completely. And of course, this is about mitigating cybersecurity risk because, of course, there's no way to completely get rid of it. But it certainly makes it a little bit harder, or quite a bit harder for people.
Yes.
And that's essentially that's the general gist of everything that I'm going to be talking about. Is this all just kind of helps kind of stomp it down, try to stop it from happening, but there's just no way to stop it completely.
Oh, no, yes, completely. I agree with you 100%. No way. Yeah, we try just to reduce it as much as possible, as you said. Yeah, we try just to reduce it.
And so that's why, in particular, I think obfuscation is a very strong mitigator for risk, for cybersecurity risk, just because there is very simple obfuscation, like I said. For simple games, that's probably a good enough idea, especially like free games or something like that, like mine. But even for paid games or more advanced games, creating a strong obfuscation algorithm or function would be extremely cost beneficial, I think.
I see.
Because it's one of the simplest methods that hackers can use to get into your game is to like reverse engineer it, and obfuscation is a way for them to make it extremely difficult for them to do that. And like I said, by having some more complex obfuscation methods, it makes it exponentially harder for them. So yeah, I think that's an extremely powerful one. There's of course lots of others that we'll be talking about. Let's see. So standalone computer game. Okay. I think, Kaiser was my only standalone computer game. The others were going to use online methods for DRM and things like that. So I think I'm done with this question. But let me think if there's...
Okay.
Is there anything else for standalone? Oh, yeah, actually, there's plenty. There's a ton of them. There's CD keys. I mean, like, I wasn't going to use CD keys, but there's like things just like keys or CD keys or something like that that allow people to okay. So there can be CD keys where you use a certain algorithm to develop some kind of key, basically, or password, I guess you could say, or something like that, that the game can recognize as being legal or illegal if it doesn't fit the algorithm that it's looking for. And this is a very simple digital rights management that we saw from 1990 until even today, although it's probably a lot less used today. But yeah, just having a simple key and key function or key algorithm is a pretty quick way. It's not probably the best way at mitigating, because if you don't have obfuscation and things like that, for if people reverse engineer, they can figure out the algorithm pretty quickly and then create key crackers pretty quickly. Yeah, crackers were very, very common, especially in the early 2000s, I would say. Another very popular one from maybe more like the 80s or 90s was, and I was actually going to implement this. I'm still thinking about doing this just for fun. But like another popular one would be to do, what's it called? I can't remember exactly what it's called, but let me try to explain it.
That's fine.
It's where you usually have like a game manual because, of course, in the 80s and the 90s, manuals were very, very common. Little books or instruction books, booklets or something like that. And a lot of times they might have, it's just a normal booklet that explains the game and instructions and story and things like that. But when you first start the game, or sometimes throughout the game, it would ask you to turn to a certain page in the instruction manual and look for the, for example, fifth line down from the top and the third line from the left, and you have to put in that word 5 lines down and three words from the left, and you have to put that word into the input box of some kind, and that's their form of DRM. So to make sure that you actually own the game, you have a physical copy of the game. They force you to like look through the manual to find it. That's obviously not very useful anymore because everybody has like PDFs of the manuals and things like that. But it was a very common way to do that kind of rights management back then. Actually, I kind of like these kind of things. I know they're not useful anymore, but I still find them to be nostalgic in a certain way. There's also a code wheel, or I can't remember any of the names of these things, but basically it's like a form of like how in World War II or in most wars, one group will usually have a code that they use or some kind of code system, and a lot of times they might use like a code wheel, if that makes any sense, where like certain letters line up to other letters, so A equals E or something like that, and B equals Z or something like that, and you can use this little code wheel to figure out what a certain password is or a certain word means. And those were actually somewhat common. They weren't used all the time, but there were a few examples of those, especially in maybe the early 1990s when they were still experimenting and trying to figure out how to make better digital right protection means. Yeah, probably CD key and like things like a CD key as well. I'm going to consider my next idea like more of an online, but yeah, I think that's all for this one, I think. Yeah, well, there's a lot of overlap between online and offline. And things like
yes.
Yeah.
So, do you want me to move to question number 5? Or I think he was answering 4 and 5 together, right? Because number 5 is...
Yeah, I think I was doing number 5, maybe.
Yes,
sorry.
So you answer 4 and 5, yeah. So
okay, I did 4 and 5, yeah, sorry about that.
I got that.
Oh, okay, so let me go back to 4 really quick.